they are using both of those interchangeably, they get it, they're more productive, they tend to get part of the task done here and part of the task done on the go, and they're just much more efficient. And so it's just, the data is unquestionably in support of that.
Absolutely true. I mean, we have a consumer cloud product, and the users of this product that access from mobile, tablet, and PC, they move about 10 times more data than just the mobile access only or the PC only.
Yeah, I mean, Karl, maybe you could explore how much friction do you think is generated for users just by not, your product syncs up the kind of entire experience, right, across devices. You can kind of seamlessly pick up in one place and start in another. How much friction do you think is generated just by having to switch devices? Even if you can still get to your app and your data and stuff like that, but just by having to kind of log out on one thing, log in somewhere else. I mean, how much friction is there and how much of a gain do you think can be had by businesses to eliminate that friction with their workforces?
I think the biggest source of the friction is the initial learning curve, and then once that's taken care of, it's a win-win completely. And I don't think that businesses really have a choice, but rather they need to pursue this quickly. I mean, for our own company, just on the sort of employee level, we see the more we enable people to do things mobily and sort of time shift and what have you, the longer we retain them. Pure and simple. Like, it's not the only reason, but it's a big, big factor in retention. I mean, there's a lot going on, and the ability to manage your life and your work life in a more seamless way is critical. And apps like these, really allow that.
I was imagining the win that you get from, forget the friction for a second, of being able, so I think of the scenario as it used to be before the era of mobile computing, and if you were in the midstream on a piece of work, so an email, or let's just call it an email because it's easy for all of us to imagine, and you had to leave. You had to get in the car to go pick up your kids from school, whatever. So you slap your laptop down, you stick it in your bag, you go get on the train, let's just say, for example, where theoretically you could be working, but you didn't have mobile access, so you're not working. And then eventually you get home and you can pick up where you left off. But there's probably this massive gap there. But now, if the applications are smart enough to synchronize your activity across devices, like we were just talking about, well then, you slam your laptop, drop it in your bag, hop on the train, and you're immediately picking up where you left off. Even if you got to re-authenticate, who cares? I mean, that's like way better scenario than we've had before. So I have to think the win is so overpowering the minimal friction in that process,
We've seen this, there's a proof point of this in hospitals, right, where doctors are going from patient bed to patient bed, and they're using a lot of Windows services, right, and in this case, where a virtual desktop does make sense, right, where they could actually authenticate and their fob would automatically get them back into the session that they were, so that they could find that it took almost 3 minutes to log into all of their apps, and if you're doing patient care and you only have maybe 6 or 7 minutes with the patient, having 3 minutes of that logging in, we've got to find fast ways to get you access to your apps. And then now it's about not just on your desktop, but as you're saying, how do you transition from a desktop, and I know Bouck and other solutions do this really well of how do we transition from a desktop into a mobile or a tablet device very, very quickly and seamlessly.
Great point.
Is there any good data out there at this point about the percentage of people who weren't considered kind of knowledge workers before who are now interacting with data? And when I say this, I mean like, you think of a delivery truck driver or some kind of service personnel, agricultural inspector, somebody who may have been in the business of gathering data in some way, like they might have had a clipboard that they would write things down on, but that now is able to have, at the very edge of a business, right, where the rubber literally meets the road in the case of the truck driver, but now they're able to have this two-way, it's not just, looks like you guys still have a lot left, I'm only giving you this many boxes, write it down, but hey, looks like you only have this many left, and the shop owner says, oh yeah, just a slow time of year this time, it always happens. That's a two-way thing where a person who didn't used to be in the information part of the business can convey useful business information to the business in a way that can actually be kind of sucked up into the cloud and used. Is there any data on whether that's happening, how it's happening? Is it something that you expect to happen? You know, is everybody going to be in this kind of interactive role with data, you know, once these devices are ubiquitous?
It's really interesting. I was just thinking in the PC era, worker productivity more or less was correlated with processing speed. How do we measure that now? You know, and what is the difference?
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, it's almost gone from, you know, a straight curve to something exponential, I think.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that it's changing and that there's, I don't know the numbers offhand, but I can think of an example of a company that's about 130,000 employees. They would have said 2 years ago that about 80,000 of them were knowledge workers, and now it's almost all of them, if not all.
Yeah, you know, think about farmers, right? And we used to have guys that would go out, and every morning, when they go out to the farmer to buy the crop, they would print out in a binder and go out to the farm and say, here's what the current value of your crop is, and they'd do that transaction. They'd have to take that transaction back, and now they're using mobile to do that. But they're even going a step further, which is to say, you know, if you look at some of the big equipment manufacturers are saying, I have data about your soil that says, here's the chemistry of it, here's the tools that will work best, here's the rainfall expected to come, and not only am I going to sell you a tool, but I'm going to sell you information about your property. And so you're seeing that it really opens up a whole new set of conversations that it's not only real-time transactions, but also providing, you know, big data from the cloud to mobile devices that give you a better perspective on how to do your everyday business. This is the farming industry, right, which has been around since the beginning.
And I think just one other thought on that, I know we're short on time, but I feel like not only is, I'm looking at the monitor is the same as up there, the theme of the conference, right? The mobilization of the next 5 billion is about making every one of those 5 billion a potential endpoint of knowledge and transaction and decision making and having data, and as you said, 2 ways. But it's not just the people, it's also the Internet of Things, right? So now we're talking about sensors and smart appliances and, you know, operating equipment in operating rooms that can convey and capture data real time to better equip surgeons in their processes. And I mean, there's so many things that are interesting to think about when it comes to the Internet of Things to complement the number of endpoints that we're seeing that aren't just related to humans holding mobile devices.
Yeah, I mean, we're not mobilizing the next 5 billion. They are by default mobile.
Yeah, right.
So that brings, we've got about 5 minutes left, so an interesting way to close this discussion out. You know, we hear a lot about leapfrog economies, right? Economies that, because they didn't necessarily have huge legacy infrastructures, they're able to leapfrog directly to mobile devices and things like that because they've just built the infrastructure better for that. So how does it, or how do you think, this will be a speculative question, you know, how do you think that will play out in other parts of the world besides just the Western Europe and North America that we're, you know, that we sometimes over-focus on? I mean, something like Uber, well, that should be super easy to implement in places like China or India where people have smartphones, you know, by
road
default.
infrastructure, lots of cars.
They have increasing numbers of cars. I mean, there's nothing to stop a truly, you know, an even more peer-to-peer decentralized system from arising there. It's not even clear to me that they need something like an Uber. You could have more of a, you know, closer to a Napster or something of, you know, where it's completely decentralized. And so, you know, how does mobile impact the businesses that are operating over there when they can have these big decentralized networks, you know, or cloud-based things? How are those businesses in those parts of the world going to be able to put that to use in a way that's different from businesses here that have to struggle against the most powerful force in the universe, inertia, in order to make that happen?
I have one great story. I was at a charity event a couple weeks ago for an organization called Sama. And one of the many things they do is they will literally take a container, like a shipping container, and drop it into, you know, call it some open part of land in Africa. And that container is essentially a fully equipped mobile network. And then that allows for micro work to be farmed out to local residents who they can teach them computer skills and allow those people to do micro work. I mean, it could be an hour of data entry, it could be days of processing, whatever it is, but it gives employers an opportunity to farm work out in small chunks. It gives small businesses a way to cost effectively leverage labor in underprivileged parts of the world, and it provides employment and income for parts of the world that wouldn't otherwise have that kind of thing, and it provides infrastructure, all in the same go. And I think there's something very attractive about that combination of things, that where mobile is enabling a charitable effort and at the same time creating real work value and extending the mobile community. It's just a beautiful thing.
It's also completely diffusing innovation, I think. We're going to see that more and more.
Kind of distributing innovation, right?
Yeah, whereas, I mean, when you look at sort of what's come out of here and, other tech centers in the last 10, 15 years, it's been pretty obvious and pretty linear. But when we look around at our growing user base around the world, especially in mobile-centric markets, what we're seeing are new startup colonies coming out everywhere. And new apps and new needs are being met that, sorry, but we're not thinking about those here, And that's great.
It is great.
No?
Yeah, I would say that, I think you touched on some really good points. One of the things that if every user is connected is enabling things like simple banking, right? That people can actually have, start a savings account and actually have transactions in these very rural communities, which we think is interesting. And it's
Also
actually
urban poor communities.
Exactly, and it's giving opportunities. Different candy manufacturers are now giving a mobile device to the guy that can run around to the different outlets and see how many candy bars are left, and actually be that process for capturing information on the local site. So it is creating new opportunities, and I think we want to be careful and sensitive to how we do that in other communities. But obviously, access to information, access to education, and giving people some what we almost consider human rights is an opportunity with mobile.
Excellent. Well, our time is finished here. I want to thank our guests for being on the panel, and thank all of you for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.